See the difference? Both of these stories that these scenes are from are both rated R/TVMA. These scenes have gore. These do not. Gore is criminally underused in storytelling. There are plenty of stories with gore in them. However, what I more so mean is gore as a creative tool. Invincible. Gore carried Invincible. The action is what makes Invincible entertaining, and without gore, the action would fucking suck. Look at Marvel action. You have these big characters with big power punching and throwing each other around, all while no one is really getting hurt. The realism is gone because of the lack of gore. Without gore, Invincible would have just been another bland, boring, and creatively bankrupt superhero story. The gore in Invincible allows for small interactions like when Omni-Man is ambushed by the invisible soldiers in his house to be interesting. Without gore, this scene would have been just another Marvel movie scene where the superhero flips some bad guys over. Awesome. I understand that the Marvel superhero movies are for children. However, they are great examples of superhero movies without gore. Raid movies. A fundamental problem with American-made action movies is the actors not knowing what they're doing. The actors not knowing how to fight and do combat. My favorite live-action movie, The Raid Redemption, is a prime example of what live-action looks like when the actors actually know how to fight and do combat. The gore in this movie is also very realistic. It only buffs the action. Without it, the action would become unrealistic. The marriage of the two, the actors knowing how to do combat and the use of gore, results in very natural and creative action sequences. During this 2 versus 1 fight, the setting is very limited. However, because of the allowance of gore, it allows for creative potential. One of the characters stabs a light bulb in the bad guy's neck, dramatically and naturally boosting the fight's tension, causing for such a more memorable fight scene. This very creative and natural scene where the main character, Rama, slams a bad guy's neck on jagged exposed wood from a broken door could not have been a thing without gore. With gore, the creative potential in action is limitless. Without gore, action is very limited, causing for repetitive, boring, and an overwhelming amount of borderline pointless scenes where you have the main character flipping the bad guys over or choking the enemy. Tone influence. Gore can hold massive cadence to a story's overall tone. The gore in Kill Bill at iconic times defines the tone. The excessive fountains of blood is a perfect example of the movie's unique tone. It's too much on purpose, almost a parody of other movies while uniquely being its own thing. Excessive gore can more often than not defeat its purpose. Gore in storytelling is mainly used to buff realism, and sometimes when used in excess, that excess defeats that realism element. It's important to keep it realistic, otherwise it becomes parody. However, parody doesn't have to be a bad thing. A disturbingly realistic example of tone influence was when the main character, Pat, nearly got his arm brutally cut off in Green Room. When this happened, it was like a punch to the face. The tone of the situation they found themselves in became dreadfully serious, and this couldn't have happened without the intense gore. Another example is in Drive, when the lady gets her head blown off in the hotel with a shotgun. Another heavy tone punch to the audience's face, showing them the shift of the story's overall tone to serious, dangerous, and suspenseful. Without gore, this sudden punch wouldn't have been as impactful, and I'd argue wouldn't have worked. Symbolism. Another massive story element gore can provide is symbolism. The most famous story of all time, the Bible, has some serious gore symbolism, the crucifixion of Jesus. Without getting into the vast history or religion, my point of bringing this up is to bring home the idea that without the gore, the messages would not have been as effective. The process of Jesus living a life without sin on man's behalf, then dying a brutal death deserving of all of man's sins, is integral to the story, and without Gore, this wouldn't have worked. If the sacrifice was done via a different method, a method that is not torturous or gory, then his sacrifice would be diminished. Another example of symbolism with gore is wounds, more specifically with missing limbs, missing body parts, and large scars. This can go very far and mean many different things. The creative potential here is near limitless. For example, Guts losing his right eye and left arm is a constant reminder of the nightmarish eclipse event. Vash the Stampede and his scar-ridden body a symbol of his constant struggle for love and peace. Creative potential. Gore adds so much creative potential to any story, and it saddens me to see storytellers shy away from it, or completely avoid it in their stories that could so obviously benefit from it. An example for me is in Hunter x Hunter when Gon is fighting the bomber in Greed Island. During this fight, Gon gets one of his arms to explode so that he could eventually win the fight. I found this to be cool because this was a small glimpse of the creator of Hunter x Hunter working with Gore to buff at least this scene in his story. Without Gon getting his arm blown off during that fight, it would have been so much less memorable. It's sad to see storytellers cut or shy away from their story's full potential, just to reach a larger audience and larger profit.